The driver in this car flipping down the front stretch of Daytona is Ryan Newman. He's known by many as Rocket Man for his blazing fast speed, and by others as the Boilermaker for his engineering degree at Purdue University. But to me, he was the toughest driver in the modern era of NASCAR due to his incredible resilience in the face of horrible crash after horrible crash. Many of the incidents he was involved in were not even his fault. Many would even call him the unluckiest driver in NASCAR. But no matter how bad the crash was, he always seemed to get through it and come back stronger. So let's take a dive into the story of NASCAR's unbreakable driver, Ryan Newman. Ryan Newman began his NASCAR Cup Series career in 2000 at the age of 22, driving a one-off race at Phoenix in the 02 car for Roger Penske. Known for his incredible qualifying skill, it started immediately when he qualified 10th in the race, but in typical Newman luck, his engine expired before lap 200. In 2001, Newman ran a more expansive part-time schedule where he scored his first pole position in only his third ever race, the Coke 600. But as a young, inexperienced driver, barely even 10 laps in, you could probably guess what happened.
Be a strong contender all night long. If he doesn't beat himself. He hits down.
He got caught up in another crash later in the year, this time not his fault. But these crashes were pretty light, especially compared to the onslaught that Ryan had no idea he was about to endure. 2002 was much smoother for Newman in his first full-time season in NASCAR. His only crash was a hard hit at the Pepsi 400 at Daytona. While the crash may not look so violent, remember that at this time there was no safer barrier. It was just a concrete wall, and a square head-on hit like this is one of the most dangerous impacts for a driver. Of course, Newman, being the brick wall that he is, easily climbed out of the car himself and even waved to the fans on his way out. But a few months later at the same track would be one of the scariest wrecks of the 21st century.
Trouble off trouble more. Newman slams the wall. Man comes straighter, and Newman is in the air and over.
The crash completely ripped off his car's rear axle, as well as the right front wheel among dozens of other parts. It made everybody hold their breath as ambulances and stretchers arrived. But the fear didn't last for too long, as Newman was quickly spotted moving around in his upside-down, destroyed car. Once crews were finally able to extract him, Newman swiftly walked straight past the deployed stretcher, waving to the crowd as he got into the mandatory ambulance. This crash didn't affect Newman in the slightest. If anything, it helped him. He quickly dusted off from this wreck and won his first race of the season a few weeks later at Texas. Then he won at Dover, then Chicagoland, then Pocono, then Michigan, then Richmond, then Dover again, and finally Kansas. By the end of his sophomore year, Ryan Newman had absolutely smashed all expectations, leading a season of pure domination that was only held back from a championship by his bad luck and mistakes. At Talladega, he lost control and absolutely slammed the wall, almost flipping over again. But he instantly got out and quickly and frustratedly walked away from his wrecked car. He lost his brakes and spun a week later at Martinsville, then got taken out by Steve Park at Fontana. He had an engine blow at Michigan, then at Atlanta, after taking the pole and running near the front. Dale Jr. got him loose and he spun around and crashed. Of course, to mark the perfect end to his season, Newman got taken out quickly in the final race at Homestead. When you crash as often and as hard as Ryan Newman did over the course of the 2003 season, these impacts add up, especially in an era with cars less safe than those of today. It's no easy feat to keep your foot on the gas, but Ryan Newman did just that. 2004 was perhaps Newman's most heavy volume of crashes in a single year ever. He crashed at Texas, Pocono, Chicago, Indianapolis, Kansas, and Homestead. Some crashes were harder than others, but a crash at the Brickyard 400 stands out the most. At Indianapolis Motor Speedway, cars can easily reach over 200 miles per hour before entering each turn. This high corner speed already makes for hard crashes, but the 90-degree angled turns don't help either. To make it even worse, with Newman's crash, he was completely turned around, had zero control, and slammed into the wall with his driver's side door. Luckily for him, this was a safer barrier instead of a concrete wall, but it still doesn't change how tough his exit from the car was. Not a single moment to catch his breath was taken. He got out and unhappily tossed his gloves and equipment back at the car before once again getting into the customary ambulance. 2005 was slightly kinder to Newman, but he still got caught up in 3 wrecks throughout the year. He was slammed into at Talladega, then he blew a tire at Turn 1 in Pocono, which is the hardest corner a driver can crash at in all of NASCAR. Then he got taken out in the Sharpie 500. Of course, not a single one of these crashes even came close to injuring Ryan, and he went on to win in New Hampshire after all of these wrecks. 2006 and 2007 were much more run-of-the-mill. He managed to still get into about 3 crashes each season, but despite these, Newman pushed on, and at the beginning of 2008, pulled off every racer's childhood dream.
Yeah, the Boilermaker, Ryan Newman, Roger Penske, with the Daytona 500.
The rest of the 2008 season was very tame for Newman. For the first time in his career, he didn't crash out of a single event. But the same couldn't be said about 2009. In particular, two events that started to truly build Newman's reputation for resilience. Funnily enough, both of these incidents occurred at Talladega Superspeedway. The first showed the grit that Ryan had, and would be the start of a trend in which cars somehow made their way on top of Newman on 5 separate occasions. Ryan was fighting for the win on the last lap of the race. In front of him, Brad Keselowski turned the leader Carl Edwards, and Edwards' car swiftly got airborne and almost like a magnet smashed right into Ryan's hood. Despite absolutely slamming a flying car, Ryan kept his foot in the gas and finished the race third, a testament to how indestructible he truly is. At the fall Talladega race, Newman was fighting in the chase for the championship. He had started 7th and led a couple laps over the course of the day, and was looking to improve his 7th place points position when an accordion effect stack-up happened right in front of him and turned him around.
We've heard. Oh, here's a time crash upside down. Ryan Newman.
The crash was brutal and one of the craziest flips we've seen in NASCAR. Not only did he flip, but he slammed into the outside wall while upside down. Nobody's prepared for that. He finally came to a stop on his roof, and for the next few minutes, safety workers strained to cut open the car and extract him. When they finally cut open the roof, Ryan instantly popped up, easily climbed out under his own power, literally dusted himself off, and ignored all the safety workers on his way to the ambulance. If you want to knock down the toughest driver in NASCAR, it's going to take way more than that. The next season again started rough for Newman, with a head-on collision into the concrete wall on the backstretch during the Daytona 500, but of course he was completely fine. As the year went on, he got caught up in a couple of big ones at Talladega and Daytona, the latter of which his car actually lifted off the ground from being sandwiched so hard. The next year he had an extremely clean season with 0 DNFs. He did have a crash at the Coke 600, but the team repaired his car and he dragged his broken machine to the finish line 50 laps down in 31st place. 4 crashes tainted his 2012 season, including a big hit at Kentucky in which his car snapped and he slammed the wall twice. The next year at Talladega again though, his flip magnetism was solidified with a big crash. Kurt Busch got hooked by the 36 car of J.J. Yaley, which sent him tumbling and barrel rolling down the center of the track. Most drivers had room to swerve out of the way, but of course, out of all drivers, the flipping 78 car made its way onto Newman's roof, where it stayed for multiple seconds. Not every NASCAR driver can say they've flipped a car. Ryan Newman had done that several times by this point. Almost no NASCAR driver can say they've had a car on top of them. Ryan Newman had 2 different ones by this point, and there was much more to come. While this crash wasn't the hardest hit ever, it really shows how durable Ryan had to be over the course of his dangerous career, as he seemed to attract this danger much more than any other driver. One huge crash would encapsulate Ryan Newman's toughness in 2014. At Watkins Glen, Newman was racing behind Greg Biffle, who got off the racing line. He went through the grass, cutting off Ryan as he rejoined the track, sending Newman's 31 car into the metal wall at a rapid speed. Newman's car then hit Michael McDowell's 95 car, and by the end of it, the 31 was left in pieces, the entire rear end completely torn off. Despite this, Newman didn't care at all. He even hit the throttle and tried to drive away. But when the car didn't work, he got out so fast that the cameras didn't even catch him doing it, and walked to McDowell, who was out of the car on the ground talking with safety workers, to check on him and apologize. Both drivers ended up being okay, but this incident shows the contrast between your average NASCAR driver, who needs to take a moment to collect himself, and Ryan Newman, who chugs along no matter what happens. This season actually ended up being Newman's technical best season ever, as he worked his way through the new playoff format to finish 2nd overall in the standings come the championship race at Miami. The next few years, Ryan continued his consistent performance despite a few big moments. In 2015, he wrecked at Pocono in Turn 1 again, this time a little lighter. In 2016, for the 3rd time, he would find a car on top of him. And out of all places, this would happen at Richmond, one of the smallest tracks in NASCAR. Tony Stewart, Newman's former boss at Stewart-Haas Racing, ran him down the track and caused Ryan to crash. The crash collected several other drivers, as Newman would be rear-ended hard and pinned against the fence. Once he was there, the 83 car of Dylan Lupton came barreling in and parked his car on Newman's hood. Surprisingly, both Lupton and Newman would be able to finish the race, though laps down. It was around this time that Ryan really developed his reputation of being the toughest driver in NASCAR. Not only was he able to brush off wrecks like this, but he was also just a tough racer. Every driver agreed that he was the hardest driver to pass on the track. In an era with lots of courtesy in racing, where it was customary to let faster cars pass you to avoid conflict, Newman never bought into this philosophy, and always gave it his all in every single corner. This was put on display to its fullest extent a few years later at Bristol, but before that were 3 wrecks that defined his 2018 season. The season was a down year for Newman and Chevrolet as a whole. His 3 big crashes came at Texas, Talladega, and Kansas. At Texas, he was running in second place temporarily off a strategy call when his old tires finally gave out heading into turn 1. He slammed the wall quite hard, but kept pushing forward for the rest of the season. These kinds of crashes are no joke. They're exactly the types of hits that ended Dale Earnhardt Jr.'s career early with concussions, so it truly is remarkable how Newman could handle them easily. At Talladega, Ryan Newman would receive a car on top of him for the 4th time in his career. During practice, he was drafting behind Jamie McMurray, when for whatever reason Jamie's left rear tire blew out and he spun around right in front of Ryan on the straightaway, and his car went airborne right on top of Newman's 31. The flip magnet had struck once again, but at least it wasn't a hard hit for Newman and it was only practice. But this wasn't even the last time in 2018 that Newman had a car on top of him. At Kansas, a year prior, a crash had broken Eric Almirola's back. The track is no joke and it's not easy to navigate. Ryan Newman probably already knew this, but it really hit him in the face when William Byron lost control right in front of him, slammed the wall hard enough to lift the back tires up, and parked his car on Ryan Newman's hood, marking the 5th time a car had made its way onto Ryan's car. Both he and Byron were okay after the wreck and continued to push forward. In 2019, we saw that tough-to-pass quality of Newman in its fullest form at the Bristol night race. Leader Matt DiBenedetto was in control and looking to defend Denny Hamlin and capture his first Cup Series victory. The problem for him? He had to lap Ryan Newman. While many drivers in the closing laps would pull over and let the leaders fight for the win, Newman fought hard to avoid being lapped, so that if a caution came out he could stay in contention. He also was fighting a tight battle to make it into the playoffs, so every point mattered, and a new winner like DiBenedetto would bump him down a spot too. This multi-lap holdup pushed DiBenedetto right back to the clutches of Denny Hamlin, who was able to overtake him in the closing laps for the win. Ryan Newman showed once again that not only was he tough, he was uncompromising. But the next year would be the most pivotal moment in Ryan Newman's career, and possibly his whole life. At the Daytona 500, Ryan started 7th and ran well all day, leading 15 laps. As the race wound down, tensions rose higher and higher. In the final 20 laps, crash after crash happened, and Newman did a great job of evading them until finally they stopped, and Ryan was side by side with Denny Hamlin for the final restart. Newman expertly weaved his way up and down, handling pushes better than anyone else in contention, until the final stretch to the finish line. Ryan Blaney made a move to try to steal the win, but Newman blocked it well. Blaney then tried to fall in and push Newman to the win, but instead hooked him in one of the worst crashes this century. Newman had slammed the outside wall, flipped multiple times, been slammed in the driver's side window by Corey LaJoie, crossed the finish line 9th, and finally came to a rest upside down, his car spilling fuel with a small fire burning. Everybody was speechless. Everybody was prepared for the worst. Crews began to extract him, and black privacy shields didn't help ease the thoughts of the public. Newman was eventually removed from the car and transported to the hospital, where we all eagerly awaited news surrounding his condition. Finally, we got a statement from Roush Fenway Racing, including a picture of Ryan and his 2 daughters with huge smiles on their faces. Soon after, he was released from the hospital with what was officially called a bruised brain. Newman missed a few races after this, but came back after the COVID break to run a full schedule. Although after this crash, Newman never had the same success in the NASCAR Cup Series again, only scoring 6 more top 10s and 2 more top 5s in 73 races, the sheer ability of the man to survive such a horrible wreck and continue racing is tremendous. And it's not like Newman lost his skill. His car was really the problem in these last couple of years. In fact, Ryan Newman ran 2 full seasons in the Stewart Racing Experience, a short-track racing series, where he finished 2nd in 2022 and won the championship in 2023. The way I see it, Ryan didn't lose a step, but he instead stepped back and admitted that he was skeptical of the safety of the 7th generation Cup car, which is why he refuses to come back full-time to the series. As an engineer, Ryan had helped develop the Newman bar that played a part in saving his own life in the 2020 crash. He must have been thoroughly upset to see drivers like Kurt Busch and Alex Bowman get hurt from the new car, and also frustrated over Ryan Preece's crash at Daytona, in which he flipped 11 times. If even a superhero like Newman is a stickler for safety, it's time NASCAR reflects on their safety and puts it as the #1 priority again, before something bad happens. But regardless of how dangerous racing can be, we know one thing. If Ryan Newman crashes, he's getting out of that car. Period. Thanks for watching, everyone.